Hey fam, happy Wednesday. We're only 2 days from the weekend. Thanks for making the time to be here. Let's talk about the story that matters today and how to make it actionable. And I'm very excited to be joined today by Budrino Politics, the Ottawa Oracle, as we call him. We talk every Friday about the election in our election stream on Twitch, 8 p.m. Eastern. And what he called last week was that the Liberals would become more use their pawns to interfere a little bit more in the media. But what I did not expect to see was Budrino himself come out and shake up the election with some reporting the other night that blew up today. So Budrino, can you share a little bit about what happened and what is the story that you're now shaking Canada with?
Sure. So the other day, I took a look at the Elections Canada website, and I noticed while I was scrolling through all the different ways to vote and stuff like that, I noticed on their website they talked about how they weren't doing in-person on-campus polling this year. And I thought it was weird. I clipped the text and I put it on Twitter, and that tweet blew up. And then today I did some more research behind it, and it turns out that the federal government in 2015 and 2019 started a vote on campus program. Across the country, it's about over 100 campuses where it's basically an easier way for students to vote, especially students at this time of year who just recently moved into residence or moved in nearby and might not know the polling areas and the candidates and that stuff. So when I did some more research about it today, I noticed that it's actually helped voter turnout for young people. Because in Canada under Harper, voter turnout was very low among young people. But then in 2015, it rose. And then in 2019, it rose again. And I think part of that was this on-campus voting system. And in 2019, over 115,000 students used it. So to put in perspective, like that's how big it was. And from 2015 to 2019, I think it grew like 40%. So chances are that it was very likely to do that again, grow 30, 40% and be in the 150,000 range of students voting this way.
That's amazing. Like I've seen some responses because your tweet blew up, and I like CBC's covered it. Jagmeet Singh's responded to it. I don't know if the Liberal Minister for Youth, I think that's Trudeau. I don't know if they've responded to it yet, but it's really interesting. And I think I've seen like lots of people post pictures and videos too, saying these were the lineups we had to face in like Alberta, for example, because we only had one mobile booth. So these are all these people who want to be involved and want to vote, but now they don't even have the option to line up and vote when that independently was not serving us. I don't know if you have a take, because I know you've joked about voter suppression and things like that. I don't know how serious to take it, because a lot of the time your jokes are just so on point. I'm like, yo, is he real? Are we seriously saying this is suppression? Because I think there's an element to it, yes, but I don't know where your mind's at.
Yeah, like I'm not pulling like a Republican thing where I'm saying like it's voter suppression, voter fraud, there's millions of students voting. Like I'm not saying that kind of stuff. Yeah. But in terms of democracy and what I view as a healthy democracy and things like that, I said some things that I think some people found controversial. I don't think Trudeau isn't necessarily solely responsible for this, because Elections Canada is separate from Trudeau. But the messaging they put out today, they put out a tweet. They actually responded. They got so many requests of people asking about this. Elections Canada put out a tweet not too long ago, and they said because of the pandemic and because of the short-term notice from the minority government, that's why they can't offer this service. And to me, you would figure with the pandemic, you would figure that they'd find a way around that. We're almost 2 years into this. Like, to me, students are on campus this semester, right? So, there is an element, I think. Now, I'm not saying Trudeau came out and had meetings in the back rooms and he said, okay, we are shutting down. We're doing this on purpose to stop young people from voting. But what I do think happened is that Trudeau called this election without specifically really caring about making voting accessible for young people. Even the mail-in voting stuff, it's been expanded a bit, but it hasn't been expanded to the point of how easy it would be in the States. It's harder here to get a mail-in ballot than it is in certain states. So I think in that sense, my realistic take, I'm not exaggerating or anything. I think Trudeau essentially, he thought about this and he just didn't do anything to really help it, because the Liberals have strategists. They have very smart people working for them in the industry. Like they have people who know what they're doing, and I'm sure those people said to him, look, if you call an election in September, what do we think is going to happen with students? What do we think is going to happen with mail-in voting? And the Liberals failed. They wanted to amend mail-in voting last year, but the bill didn't pass. And then this thing with the students, this is something that it's kind of just it's kind of like the shrapnel from Trudeau's irrational decision to hold a very quick. Because the other thing too is he does hold some responsibility in this, because he chose the shortest time possible to have this election. So 35 days. It could have been 50 something. So maybe if he gave them 50 something days worth of notice, they would have had time to do this, because we're only talking about 100 polling. It's like 120, I think, or something. It's not that many stations across the country in terms of this. Like, it's only 120 stations at campuses across the country. We're not talking about like thousands and thousands and thousands. It's, to set up those kinds of things. Okay, you do it in the university center, you set up some rooms, you get some staff. Maybe 30 days wasn't enough notice, but I'm thinking, 2 months notice or a little bit more would have been enough to put together something like that. So I'm not sitting here saying that Trudeau is like, intentionally suppressing the vote the way that like Republicans or other countries do. But I do think he didn't do his due diligence to make sure that voting was accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, I fucking love talking to you. You're just so smart, dude. Yeah, like I think like I could totally see that conversation taking place where they've got their table there and they're just running through what the outcomes are. And I guarantee that somebody said, "Are we concerned about the youth vote? Are we concerned how that impacts them?" And then somebody brushed them off. So I totally agree. It was something they were aware of, but it was not necessarily a calculation in making that determination. But surely, if they've locked it down for students, they locked it down for seniors and other old people who use mobile voting. Is this something that we've heard?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly grab a statistic here. So Elections Canada on their website, anyone can just go and look this up. They said in 2019, over 5,334 facilities were visited by a mobile polling station. So Elections Canada will go to certain seniors' homes, long-term care homes, places like that. Some of those places are big enough that they just have a polling station normally, but some of them are smaller. And for those people, Elections Canada will bring a mobile polling station to that place to help older people vote. And that's very, it works, right? If you look at voter turnout for old people, we have very high voter turnout for people above 75. A lot of those people are in long-term care homes or in places where they're getting some kind of care, or assisted living, or even independent living, condominiums and stuff like that. So that number I gave there, over 5,000, that's a lot of time to prep that stuff. Now, I don't think it's going to be 5,000 this year, because they said with COVID, it's going to be more complicated getting access to those long-term care homes and doing stuff like that. And they might do it social distance, I was reading. But, for the government of Canada, Elections Canada, to be going, out of their way to do this, over 5,000 different locations in 2019, compared to, we're just talking about like 120 campuses across the country. I think, when I look at this, it makes me a little bit skeptical, because it's like, okay, well, if they can arrange all these things for older people, how come they can't put it together for some younger people? Because like I said, you do it in a university center, you get some chairs, you get some staff. I can't imagine it being, and I imagine with COVID, it's hard to staff, but like, I can't imagine it being that hard to do something like this. And I think the thing with older people too is like, I'm not sitting here saying, let's take away grandma's vote and make it so grandma has to walk 2 kilometers to the polling station.
Yeah.
I just want to see a democracy where it's as democratic as possible and it's as easy as possible to put out a vote. Because the biggest problem we're seeing here with this demographic of young people, students 18 to 25, a lot of these people are first-time voters and they're not registered. And a lot of people aren't registered in that age group. And that's one of the biggest barriers. I know we talk about young people being skeptical of voting and stuff, but one of the biggest barriers is just they might not have a license. They might not have all the ID on them. They're busy with school. So I think in that sense, what I've been advocating for here is just bring back these polling centers, bring back these 100 polling centers to make it easy. A lot of students, especially right now too, with COVID, they're not really sure where they're living or how long they'll be living there. It's a very tumultuous time. September 20th is still very early in the year. People are just getting settled. So I think, there is a little bit of hypocrisy there of going out of the government elections Canada going out of their way to get votes to like people in seniors' homes, but not so much just 120 campuses across the country.
Yeah, and I think just in general, that's a great take. But we're also at a point where we're dealing with the greatest economic recovery of our time with COVID. We've got climate crisis hitting us like never before. I don't think it's ever been a more urgent time to really have a true democratic reflection of what it is the people want. And we're just being kneecapped however possible. So yeah, I don't know if you have any final takes till we jump to how to make this actionable portion.
I think for me, the one thing I'll just say is like mail-in voting. A lot of people, there's going to be another wave of COVID coming. A lot of people are going to be just trying to focus on going to work, going to school, not getting sick. I think a lot of people, if you're unsure about whether you want to vote in person or vote by mail, vote by mail. The deadline's September 16th. If you go on Elections Canada, it's pretty close on the website. You just click, check to see if you're registered to vote. If you are, you go to the mail-in voting, and then it's pretty easy. Remember how before I talked about the fax stuff? You can use, they changed their minds. You can use scanners, you can use whatever for your ID. So even if you don't have a license, you can use, your health card and utility bill or whatever. But I do think with COVID and with this, and students specifically with these polling stations, I think it's very important for these students to just vote by mail. That's probably the easiest way. It's the most convenient way. That's probably just the best way to do this during COVID, not having access to these polling stations. That's just the best way to do it. Vote by mail.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's what I was just going to echo is I think to make it actionable, it's like, let's share that information of how to do it to as many people as possible, even the boomers, because we don't necessarily want them going out and getting COVID. But I think like myself, I'll make some graphics and like maybe we'll do like a how-to video, but like wherever possible, share that content, I think is the easiest thing to do. And then I'll say like the next step is to like make content yourself, to share it with people, share it with your grandma, share it with your friends, get that out there. And then one thing that I think is really important that isn't necessarily directly related to the mobile voting, but is trying to work towards getting the voting age lowered. Because I think as we have like 16-year-olds vote, again, we're at a crisis in terms of the economy, in terms of climate. I think if we get just those important voices to be heard, but also by having so many more new young people, it will increase the volume and the necessity and the voices crying out for where the fuck is our mobile stations as we have more people. So I think the long-term vision, just get as many people towards youth voting. I think municipally is the easiest way to get that momentum. And Vancouver recently passed a recommendation to the provincial governments to allow it to happen in municipalities. But hopefully we can keep pushing for that at the cities, then the provinces, and then federally we'll see it too. I think the NDP advocated for it last election, and I hope they start speaking up to it soon. Is there anything else from those points that you think you want to build on?
I'll just say with, I think with voters like 16 as an age, I think that works really well because while kids are still in high school, it's really easy to vote. Some people will turn 18 in their high school year. And if an election happens that year, I think that happened for me. It's very easy to vote and register to vote because it's usually in your school. And I think that's a great way to get young people registered and get them to the polls, is that if you can vote while you're at school, everyone's going to do it for sure. I think that the biggest problem is people might not, political scientists have looked at this and there has been some studies, but I think to me, just the hugest thing is getting people registered because Canada voter ID laws are, they're okay, but they are a little strict at some points, right? So if it's kind of hard for some people you might not have a utility bill, it might be in your parents' name or something, or, things like that. So I think for sure 16-year-olds, that would be great because I think there'd be really high turnout from those folks.
Yeah. And like we see them active like we've never seen previous generations, just because it's the generation most likely to die because of negligent decisions made by the seniors. But I'm excited to see that power restored to the people who care about it. Like Fridays for Future is always an exciting thing. I think we've got another big project coming up in September, and this is all high school kids leading this, planning this. I've talked to one of the organizers who did the Vancouver one, and there was no planning, there was no support. It was just high school kids talking to each other saying, nobody gives a fuck about us. What are we supposed to do? So always talk to your neighbors and your colleagues, and I think people will be able to find some points of common action. Even if you have no idea what the fuck you can do, you can mobilize millions, as we saw in Vancouver. So I'm stoked for the future as long as we get more people, young people involved. And Yeah, it was depressing to see that story, but thank you so much for breaking it. Have you got anything else in your lens that you're planning on dropping on us before the end of the week?
No, I wasn't really expecting this, and this turned out to be like a much larger thing than I thought.
Yeah, I guess quickly, like any tips, because CBC picked it up. Jagmeet Singh's talking about it. A lot of big personalities are now kind of following your lead on it. Any tips on helping get leftist stories in the mainstream as you build that up?
I think amplifying is just so huge. Like I think with help with this is that so many people retweeted it quickly that it just got a very large reach, and then it gets to other people where they're disagreeing with me, but they're still amplifying it, and it just amplifying gets so big. So I think when you see a really big story, another example I'll just say quickly was the Doug Ford when he put out that the invoice. It was a donation. It was supposed to look like an invoice, and I saw some left-wing people put that out, and enough people amplified it, and then eventually it got into the media, and then there was a big story. So I think amplification is really a big part of that.
Awesome. Well, you heard it from the Ottawa Oracle himself. Budrino, thank you so much for making the time. Yeah, I'm going to send you and everyone watching love and solidarity. Have a fantastic day. Peace. They bullied and oppressed us, but still our union grows. And we're going to find a way, boys, for shorter hours and better pay, boys. Yes, we're going to win the day, boys. Where the Fraser River flows.